Under the pale morning light of Jerusalem, security convoys weave through the stone-lined streets toward the Prime Minister's office. The air carries a familiar tension, one that comes whenever US envoys arrive with proposals that could redefine Israel's next chapter in Gaza. Inside the compound, cameras flash as US Special Envoy Jared Kushner sits down with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for what officials quietly call a pivotal discussion, the transition from Phase 1 to Phase 2 of the Gaza plan. Moments later, the government spokeswoman, Shosh Bedrosian, steps before reporters gathered in the courtyard. Her tone is measured, her words deliberate. I can share with you today that Special Envoy Jared Kushner is here in Israel and had a meeting with the Prime Minister this morning in his office here in Jerusalem, she begins. The statement, simple at first, quickly grows into one that reveals the contours of a delicate and high-stakes conversation. She continues, together, the two discussed Phase 1, which we are currently still in, to bring our remaining hostages and the future of Phase 2 of this plan, which includes the disarming of Hamas, demilitarizing Gaza, and ensuring Hamas will have no role in the future of Gaza ever again. The phrasing is unambiguous. For Israel, this is not just about rebuilding or managing Gaza, it is about reshaping its political and military structure entirely. Phase 1 of the plan, the current stage, focuses primarily on hostage recovery and humanitarian corridors. Israeli officials working with US intermediaries have overseen a fragile process of exchanges and aid flows, even as intermittent fighting continues in northern Gaza. The meetings between Kushner and Netanyahu are meant to set the framework for what comes after, a phase that could transform Gaza's governance and security landscape for decades. Bedrosian outlines the details further. Phase 2 also includes the establishment of the International Stabilization Force, and the details of which, of course, together are being discussed. Those words, International Stabilization Force, immediately draw attention. Diplomats listening in the courtyard exchange glances. The concept, while not new, has long been a red line for regional players wary of foreign boots on Gaza's soil. According to officials familiar with the discussions, the proposed force would likely involve Arab and Western participation under a UN or coalition framework. Its aim, to provide interim security and logistical governance once Hamas's control is dismantled. While Israel insists such a force would not compromise its own security oversight, Washington sees it as a bridge, a way to prevent Gaza from descending into chaos once military operations subside. Inside the meeting, sources say Kushner pressed Netanyahu for clearer timelines, not only for demilitarization, but for political transition mechanisms. The US is keen to avoid what happened after past conflicts, where power vacuums led to renewed violence. Kushner's message reportedly centered on sustainability, ensuring that any security gains are tied to long-term reconstruction and regional cooperation. For Netanyahu, however, Phase 2 carries its own risks. The idea of international oversight inside Gaza challenges Israel's long-held insistence on maintaining full security control over its borders and immediate neighbors. Yet with American support crucial to Israel's diplomatic cover and economic stability, the Prime Minister knows that balance is essential. Officials close to the Prime Minister describe the conversation as frank but cooperative. Kushner, who has long cultivated relationships with Israeli leaders, framed the plan as a continuation of the Abraham Accords logic, regional cooperation leading to stability and development. The US envoy reportedly underscored that Gaza's future cannot be solely a military project, but must be tied to a broader regional reintegration, including trade, infrastructure, and humanitarian rebuilding. Meanwhile, inside Israel, public opinion is divided. Many citizens, weary from months of conflict, support the government's aim of preventing Hamas's return to power. But others express skepticism over the feasibility of international forces or reconstruction efforts without Palestinian leadership. Opposition lawmakers warn that unless political frameworks are discussed alongside security ones, Israel risks being drawn into an indefinite occupation. In the region, reactions are mixed. Cairo has cautiously welcomed the mention of demilitarization, but insists that any international force must be coordinated through the Arab League and must include Palestinian Authority participation. Amman, too, has voiced support for stabilization, but warned against unilateral Israeli or American control over Gaza's reconstruction. From Washington's perspective, Kushner's visit marks a reassertion of the US role as a mediator and architect of post-war frameworks. The Biden administration, still facing domestic criticism over its handling of Middle East policy, sees in Gaza's second phase an opportunity to reshape narratives around American diplomacy, shifting from managing crisis to building solutions. As Bedrosian's remarks conclude, reporters shout questions about timelines, the role of Arab states, and whether Israel would allow international forces on its borders. She declines to elaborate, saying only that discussions are constructive and ongoing. Her restraint reflects the sensitivity of the talks, every word calibrated for multiple audiences, the Israeli public, the US administration, and the broader Arab world. Later in the day, sources close to the meeting reveal more details. Kushner emphasized that Phase 2 must begin only after the last hostages are secured and verified, a condition that remains a moral and political priority for both governments. Netanyahu, in turn, reiterated Israel's position that no element of Hamas, military or political, can remain intact in Gaza's future administration. Behind the diplomatic statements lies a deeper question, what Gaza will look like in the aftermath. Will it be an internationally supervised enclave rebuilding under Arab financial support? Will it fall under a reformed Palestinian Authority's control? Or will Israel, wary of outside interference, maintain indirect oversight through border management and security coordination? Kushner's visit signals that Washington and Jerusalem are aligned on the ultimate goal, removing Hamas from the equation, but still diverge on the methods and the degree of international involvement. Analysts note that Kushner's return to the region, years after his work on the Abraham Accords, is symbolically significant. It suggests a revival of that diplomatic architecture, one that links Israel's security interests to broader regional integration, potentially involving the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia in post-conflict stabilization. Each of these nations has vested interests in preventing Gaza's collapse and curbing Iranian influence. The mention of a stabilization force also revives memories of past missions, from UNIFIL in Lebanon to the multinational force in Sinai. Each had its own challenges, from limited mandates to contested legitimacy. Diplomats familiar with those experiences warn that Gaza's complexity, and with its dense urban environment, displaced populations, and volatile political vacuum, makes any peacekeeping or stabilization effort uniquely difficult. Still, the stakes are high enough that all sides are exploring options. For Israel, it's about preventing a return to rocket fire and militant tunnels. For Washington, it's about showing leadership in an increasingly multipolar region. And for Arab capitals, it's about averting another generation of instability spilling across their borders. In the coming weeks, technical teams from both governments are expected to meet again to define the operational structure of Phase 2, which nations will contribute forces, how command will function, and what the chain of authority will look like. Financial mechanisms for reconstruction, likely managed through the World Bank or a regional trust fund, are also being discussed. Inside Gaza, the humanitarian crisis remains acute. Even as discussions of demilitarization and stabilization dominate headlines, the population faces shortages of medicine, electricity, and housing. Aid groups have called for any Phase 2 planning to include immediate infrastructure rehabilitation, arguing that political blueprints mean little without tangible relief. In private, Israeli officials admit that the scope of Phase 2, if realized, would amount to one of the most ambitious post-conflict reconstruction efforts in modern Middle Eastern history. The parallels drawn to post-war Lebanon or Iraq are often raised, but unlike those cases, Gaza's geography, blockade, and population density make implementation far more complex. As dusk falls over Jerusalem, the city's skyline glows under the soft amber of streetlights. The day's discussions between Kushner and Netanyahu may not have produced public breakthroughs, but they have charted a roadmap that could determine Gaza's future for decades to come. For now, Bedrosian's remarks stand as the official line, carefully worded but heavy with implication. The Israeli government sees itself still in Phase 1, focused on hostages and military objectives. The Americans, however, are already pushing toward Phase 2, where diplomacy, reconstruction, and international cooperation take center stage. The next meetings, expected to include military advisors, intelligence officers, and regional envoys, will likely delve into operational details. border control, refugee resettlement, and the integration of local governance mechanisms. Washington is pressing for speed, aware that political momentum can fade quickly, but Israeli officials caution that moving too fast could jeopardize ongoing military goals. Between these competing timelines lies the delicate art of diplomacy and the fragile hope that Gaza, long defined by war, might finally enter a stage of rebuilding. Whether that hope becomes reality depends on how both Phase 1 and Phase 2 are balanced, between force and negotiation, between sovereignty and cooperation, between security and humanity. In Jerusalem tonight, the talks continue behind closed doors. The cameras have gone, the corridors quiet once more, but the message from today's meeting is clear. The post-war blueprint for Gaza is no longer a distant plan. It has begun taking shape, one cautious conversation at a time.